Hi guys, welcome back to the workshop. What I want to do today is just take a quick 5-minute video. We've had many people asking about how we fit the seats in the car, and obviously I'm aware that obviously it's not something that's covered in the build manual, so I've been trying quite keen to get a video out there of the whole process of fitting the seats, but also why we fit them in such a way that we do. So we've got a couple of cars in at the moment in time. This one's here, was in with us last week, but he's made the classic error or mistake of fitting the seats in the wrong way, and I'm going to explain why he's fitted them in the wrong way and how they need to be fitted. It's quite a common thing. And then next to it we've got a car that the customer also made that same mistake but was advised how to do it properly, and I'll show you the difference between the two. So immediately what you'll see between the two cars is if we install the seats what would be a logical way with the seat base flat attached to the floor, it brings the seat back, so it's instead of it being vertical it's tipped forward, which has two effects really. One is it tips the seat forward, which means that you kind of sat really forward in the car, which is not ergonomically correct. But the biggest problem that we have is it makes the back of the seat really high. So if you look at that there, we're literally about the same height as the roll bar. Now there's a couple of reasons that we don't want to achieve that. The first one is obviously if that's that high, your bum's also that high as well, which means when you're sat in the car with your windscreen on, the wind hits the windscreen, and it's also got a chance of hitting your head if you're a taller person. So that's one reason. Secondly, we want to get the weight as low as possible in the car for performance, which goes without question. Get that centre of gravity nice and low. But the third reason is more from a safety point of view, which is around the IVA. And that is the fact that from something called your R point, which we're not going into too much details, but it's kind of your hip point, there needs to be a measurement from your hip point to the upper seatbelt anchorages of 450 or higher. Now obviously what we use to measure that is there's a little diagram on the IVA manual, but for intents and purposes I use a little box, and what you're looking for, and that accurately does your ride, and I'm just going to eyeball it for the moment in time, but we're looking for 450 mil from that point there, which is about here. Okay, if we drew a line through the seat, that shows that we've not got the required 450 mil in as anchorage point. Okay, so there's a couple of different options at that point. The correct option is to get the seat lower. The other option is you can raise your seatbelt anchorage points just slightly if it's just out by a couple of mil. But the other problem that we have, which is really apparent, I'm not going to get someone in the car, but if you look here, what's happening when you're in the car, instead of the seatbelt coming straight over your shoulder, it's actually being supported by the seat, which they don't like that neither, so that's obviously not what you want. The anchorage point needs to come nicely through the back of the seat, over your shoulder, making minimal contact with the seat. So if we look at this one as an example, you can see here how once someone's in the car, the shoulder's there, and actually the seat, other than having the holes passing through it, is not actually supporting or doing anything. And that's kind of where we want to be. Now, how do we get to that from that? Well, it's pretty simple, really. We have to follow a process of installing quite a lot of spacers at the front of the seat. And the idea is that we're going to tilt the seat this way by raising the front, and that takes the back right down. Which obviously when you get the seats, they come with all different spacers, bits and bobs. So what I'm going to do is get ready. I'm going to take these seats out, and then I'll pick the camera back up and I'll show you how we go about doing that to make sure the seats are fitted properly, and we'll go from there. Okay, so just quickly took this seat out of the car. I think we're just going to work through one seat at a time. And if we have a look at what the customer's done, he's got 90% of what we do correct. So you can see here that he's got the runner the correct way round. So we have this big deep channel that goes towards the seat, and this smaller channel here goes towards the bottom. And he's also cut down this, which is what we recommend as well. But what he has done wrong, obviously, it's a lot of it is in the spacing, which we'll touch on. So just to quantify what you get when you go to the seats, obviously you'll get a seat. In the box for the seats, right at the bottom of the box, there'll be a pack of spacers. Now you've got 2 large spacers, steel spacers, and 2 smaller ones. The number of customers that claim that they never had these, and I've personally witnessed them going out, just be really careful, just check the bottom of the box. We've had several customers ring up and they've actually then found them at the bottom. There's obviously a lot of packaging in the seat, but these obviously you're going to need. So you'll get that. Obviously you'll get a seat runner that will come in a cardboard box, and then you'll get a selection of different fixings and fasteners, which I'll talk you through as we do that. Now you will notice here that there's 2 different types of runners. So whilst they are essentially the same thing, they do look slightly different. And when we come to this section, how we modify this is slightly different to this one, but it's the same principle. So yeah, they're the later, more modern runners. Okay. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take this to bits, and then I'm going to reassemble it in the way that it should be assembled. And at that point, if you're new to this, obviously, and it's first time, you just need to follow this section, and we go from there. But essentially, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be maximising the number of spacers at the front, minimising the number of spacers at the rear. And what that's going to do in turn, it's going to mean that the seat is going to sit back further that way. So on the seat of the car, it's going to come slightly further forward, but the seat essentially is going to be leant back. The seat was always designed to do that, and it's perfectly normal for the front section here to be a lot higher than the rear. When you sit in the 2 back to back, it's world apart in terms of comfort. And we're going to be aiming for this to be pretty much vertical, and obviously this to line up with the back of the car. Okay, so I'm going to start stripping it, and then we'll look at how it goes together. Okay, so we just popped the runner off the seat, and because I've had it, messing around with it, I just want to make sure that we understand which way it goes on. So I've got it laid out here on the bench, and I know that this is going to go to the floor, and this flat bit is going to go to the seat. So essentially, it's going to go kind of this way. Just want to make sure that when you pull that articulates that to pull up, which we know that's the right way around. So essentially this is how it's going to go onto the car. There's one thing that I do recommend that we do before we start fitting it, is the mounting lugs here that go through the floor. Because we're going to be sliding this runner back and forth, it's good to get these in place at this stage. So what I've done, I've gone to the floor, I've measured the centre, which I know is 320mm. So I've chose my holes here. So if I measure that there to that leading edge, 320. And then if you see what I've done here, I've put an XZ bolt in there with just a plain nut. And these are not overly tight at the moment in time. Now the one at the back, you can actually tighten up a little bit more because that's in a circular hole. So we'll just nip that up. But the one at the front, it's actually able to slot. And the reason I've done that, when you go to fit this in the car, it's so much easier to have a little bit of wiggle room just here. And then obviously when we tighten up and we rotate this, it actually tightens up on itself anyway. So it's up to you. You can either massively tighten this one, or you can just leave it nipped up. And again, that'll just give you that little bit of free play if you need it. Okay, so do the same on both sides. You just must make sure that you put an XZ bolt in there, because all it does is it stops it rotating on itself, so that when you tighten it up from underneath, I've seen these come in where they've ran like a cap head bolt and the whole thing spins and it just becomes a world of pain. So try and avoid that. And these are the M8x30s that come in the kit. Okay, so now we'll talk about spacing. So what I've got here is how I do we do the seats. So in the kit, as I said to you before, you've got a large spacer and a short spacer. You've got an 100mm bolt, and then I also steal one of the spacers from the runners. And essentially what's going to happen here is this is going to mount up through here. You've got a spring washer, and you've got that. And then I go the small washer, the next size up. And then if you have a look at this one, what I've done here is you'll notice that I've just run a slitting disc across there, and I've put it at a slight angle. And the reason for that, it will become apparent in just a second, but when we go to fit this, you've got plenty of thread engagement there. I have mocked this up first to make sure that that it's not too long. But essentially when this goes in here, this is going to become at this kind of angle. So I've slightly tapered this so that it's nice fit. So we're not going to massively tighten this up, we're just going to nip this up and then we're going to have a look at the other end. Okay, so obviously once you've got these studs in here ready to go, then obviously you want to start fitting it to the seat. I've done one side for reference, but I'll just talk you through this. So the point to look at here is the angle in which it's coming from the seat. So we've got one spacer at the back there, but at the front we've got a considerable amount of spacers. Now, what I've done for this illustration is these spacers here, they've been slightly chamfered, so they've got a slight chamfer, and that's by putting it up against the seat, looking at that angle and making sure that it's equal here, just so that we've got no gaps. Now obviously the spacers don't come pre-done like that. It's not absolutely detrimental that you do that, it just looks a little bit nicer. So 100mm bolt through, as I've got on this one here, the spacer that's just been slightly chamfered to take the angle in next, secondary spacer, and then the top spacer just there. And then it's a little bit awkward, just get that kind of going, just make sure that you don't cross thread it. Yep, that's going. And then I'm just going to tighten that up, but not all the way, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so obviously this we need enough so it's not overly tight to go there, so this is where the little chamfer on these helps, so that goes there, and that'll allow it then to sit further back. And then we need to pull this runner forward, so I'm just pressing that down, and then the one at the back there we're going to line up next, and then we're going to pop this one in at the bottom with a single spacer, which will then look like this side. So we'll get both these side buttoned up, obviously then tighten this up in sequence going back to front, so you're happy that it's tightened, and then once that's in place we'll have a look at this. So I'll just finish this. That side up, push that back down, and then just going to get all my spacers nice and aligned. There we go, perfect. Okay, pull that back up, tighten that end. Okay, so we're now in a position where that is pretty much ready to fit to the car, other than installing this. Now, when we look at this here, they come and they're already very, very long. So if you install it on the original two holes, what you end up with is something like this. If it's a bit awkward, and watch your fingers when you do this. So I'm just going to put this in the original position that it comes as supplied. This one's been bent, but essentially you'll notice that it sticks out quite a lot on the seat. And because this bit is part of the seat, connected to the seat, this moves with the seat. So what you need to do, if you don't want this sticking all the way out, is essentially re-bend this by hand and move the holes a lot further forward. What we're trying to achieve is essentially it being in line with the seat, so that when you step into the seat you're not standing on it, and we essentially can get it level there. So we've now modified that. This is as the customer originally bent this, and what they've done here is they've moved it further back by re-drilling these holes. To be fair, there's a little bit of work we need to do, so we just need to take this off and make sure that it's equal. Sometimes I'll cut this back bit off because it's there actually doing nothing, but yes, I'll take this off, keep manipulating it by hand. It may take several attempts till we get a really nice fit, but essentially we're looking for it to pick up on both these holes and these two here. So that back bit probably needs bending in a little bit, and that needs slightly kinking that way. Again, it's a kind of trial and error, take 3 or 4 attempts. the new seat runner, it's got a much different design. So with this one here, your eye typically start bending in. I'll take a reference point, mark it up with tape, and then I start bending that in about here. And again, it's trial and error, just replicating the same on both sides, because if you look at that, it's far too wide. But essentially, put that in a vise, protect it with some cloth, bend that in, and we're going to be picking up the central two holes in this kind of position, and then we'll chop this back end off. So very similar to what he's done here. I'm just going to have a play with that and get a better fitment.